There is a specific kind of quiet that settles over a house when you have lived in it alone long enough. Not lonely quiet, not sad quiet, the kind that belongs to you. The kind where you know exactly which floorboard creaks at 2 in the morning, and which window lets in the smell of the neighbor's lilac bush in May, and which drawer in the kitchen sticks because the wood swelled in 1998 and has never quite gone back. That house was mine. I had made it mine the way you make something yours, slowly over years, with a lot of early mornings and not very many vacations, and a savings account I fed before I fed anything else. My name is Rosalind Fairhaven, and I am 47 years old, and the morning my younger brother told me to relax about my own property, I had been the sole owner of that house for 22 years. He found out what I did about it on a Monday. I found out what he had done about it on a Tuesday. There is a certain satisfaction in that order of events, and I will get to it. But first I want you to understand the house and the years that built it, and the brother who decided that those years were an opportunity he was entitled to use. I bought the house on Aldermoor Lane in the spring of my 25th year, on a school administrator's salary that was not large, but that I treated with a great deal of respect. It was a 1960s split level with a crack in the back foundation that the inspector noted and the seller discounted for, and a backyard that backed onto a creek that flooded twice in my first 3 years and then, somehow, never again. The neighborhood was not fashionable. The commute was 31 minutes on a good day and 48 on a bad one. The kitchen had wallpaper with small yellow roosters on it that I stripped myself over 2 weekends in October of my first year, because I could not afford a contractor and could afford sandpaper and patience. I was alone when I bought it. No partner, no family contribution, no down payment gift from anyone. I had saved $18,400 over 4 years by living in a studio apartment with one window and packing my lunch every single workday, and I put every dollar of it on that house. The mortgage was 31 years. I paid it in 22 because I put extra toward principal whenever I had it, which was not often but was often enough. My son Nate was born in the second bedroom when he was 0 years old, which is to say I was already living there when I found out I was pregnant, and the house was already mine, and that fact mattered more than I can easily explain. I had made something stable before the instability arrived, and the house held us through all of it. Through the years when Nate's father was in the picture, and the years when he was not. Through the water heater in 2009, and the furnace in 2014, and the kitchen floor in 2017, when the linoleum finally gave up entirely. Through the cracked foundation, which I filled myself with Hydrolite in 2007 on a Saturday morning in October while Nate, who was 4, handed me the applicator tip and said he was helping. He was helping. He was always helping. The last mortgage payment cleared on a Thursday in March 4 years ago. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of Earl Grey from the tin with the dent on the lid. I have had that tin for 11 years, the dent from when it fell off the pantry shelf in 2013, and I caught it before it hit the floor but not before it hit the counter, and I looked at the zero balance on the bank website for a long time. Not because I could not believe it. I could believe it. I had done the arithmetic on it for years. I looked at it because I had earned the right to look at it, and I wanted to take the full 30 seconds. The house was mine. Fully, finally, legally, entirely mine. My brother Derek is 5 years younger than me, which puts him at 42 now. We grew up in the same household, but we did not grow up in the same family, if you understand the distinction. Our mother had 2 registers for her children, the one she worried about and the one she believed in. I was the one she worried about. Derek was the one she believed in. This is not unusual. Plenty of families run exactly this way and produce perfectly decent people on both sides of the arrangement. What it meant in practice was that Derek received a series of assists across his life: a co-signed car loan at 20, a down payment gift at 28, a quiet infusion of cash at 33 when his first business ran into what our mother called cash flow trouble and what a more precise person might have called bankruptcy-adjacent collapse, and I received a different kind of education. How to do things without a net. How to calculate carefully. How to sign the papers yourself and know exactly what you are signing. I did not resent Derek for the assists. I want to be careful here because this story is easy to misread. I did not spend my adult life seething about the down payment gift. I made my own down payment. I was fine. What I did not fully reckon with for a long time was what the pattern had done to Derek, not to me. He had been raised to believe that help was structurally available, That when things got difficult, there was a mechanism, a family member who could be called, a resource that could be accessed. He had internalized that so completely that he could not always see the line between a resource and a person. After our mother died 3 years ago, and our father went into memory care the following year, the mechanism was gone. The estate was modest. The family house sold for $214,000 and split 4 ways after estate costs, which meant each of us received $47,311.42, and Derek's share went to his second business venture within 8 months. I know this because he told me in one of the Sunday afternoon visits that started not long after the estate settled. He told me casually, the way you tell someone about a remodel. He said the business needed capital, and the inheritance was the cleanest source, and he was feeling good about the trajectory. I remember nodding. I remember thinking that was his money and his choice. I remember not asking the follow-up questions that, in retrospect, I should have asked. He started coming by more after that. Every 2 or 3 weeks, on Sunday afternoons, always with a reason. Once to help me move a bookcase. Once to return a set of socket wrenches he had borrowed 18 months earlier. Once to sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and ask me whether I had updated my estate documents since paying off the house, because, as he put it, I was at the age where those things really start to matter. That last visit was 8 months before the phone call. I thought he was being thoughtful. I told my friend Diane at work. She teaches 3rd grade 3 classrooms down from my office and has known me for 11 years, and is one of those people who can read a situation the way some people read a room. I told her that Derek seemed to be stepping up since Mom died. Taking more interest. Diane looked at me over her lunch container and said, "Rose, when has Derek ever been attentive without a reason?" I told her she was being uncharitable. She was not being uncharitable. On that Sunday visit 8 months before the phone call, Derek asked if I had a copy of the deed and the most recent property tax statement. He said he had a contact at an estate planning firm, and he wanted to pass them along for free consultation on my behalf. I thought that was generous. I went to the small handwritten ledger in the kitchen drawer where I keep the reference numbers for all my accounts and property documents, pulled the folder of records I kept in the fireproof box in my bedroom closet, and made him copies. The deed, the tax record, the paid-off mortgage statement. I handed them to him at the kitchen table. He said thank you. He said he would follow up with the firm. He left at 3:47 on a Sunday afternoon, and I went back to folding laundry. I never heard anything from the estate planning firm. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in February at 4:18 p.m. I know the time because I was still at my desk finishing the quarterly enrollment report, and I almost didn't pick up. The number was a 614 area code I didn't recognize, but something made me answer. "Is this Rosalind Fairhaven?" The voice was professional. Measured. "It is," I said. "My name is Carliose. I'm a real estate attorney. I'm calling because a client of mine is purchasing a commercial property portfolio, and during our routine title search, we pulled a record I believe you'll want to know about. The property at 4 Aldermoor Lane. Are you familiar with it?" I said, "That's my house." There was a pause. Short. The kind a person makes when they are deciding how directly to say something. "Miss Fairhaven," she said, "your name is not currently on the deed to that property." I did not speak. I was looking at the enrollment report on my computer. The numbers stopped making sense. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you say that again?" She said it again. She said it the same way she had said it the first time, which I appreciated, because some people soften the repetition, and the softening can feel like being managed. I asked her to send me whatever documentation she had. She said she would email it within the hour. I thanked her. I ended the call. I looked at the enrollment report for approximately 45 seconds without seeing any of it. Then I gathered my bag, told the front office I had a family matter, and walked out to the parking lot at 4:31 p.m. I sat in the Honda Civic for 38 minutes. I want to tell you that I was calm. I was not calm. I was sitting in a car that needed an oil change with the heat running on a February afternoon, and I was trying to hold one fact in my mind without it breaking everything adjacent to it. Someone had taken my house. Not stolen from it. Had reached into the public record of the county and removed my name from the document that said the house belonged to me. And I already knew who. I knew before I opened the email she sent, which arrived at 4:49 p.m. and which I read on my phone in the front seat. I knew from the Sunday visit. I knew from the estate documents I had handed across the kitchen table. I knew from the pattern that Diane had read correctly in 30 seconds over a lunch container. The quitclaim deed was filed 9 months ago. Derek's LLC was named on it. My signature appeared at the bottom of it. My signature was not my signature. The loop on the capital F was wrong. I have written my name the same way for 30 years, and that loop was wrong, and I knew it the way you know your own face. I kept thinking about the furnace. I had financed a furnace at 6.9% and paid it off in 18 months. I kept the invoice in the fireproof box because I always kept the invoices. I thought about the Hydrolite in 2007 and Nate handing me the applicator tip and saying he was helping. I thought about the receipt for the original title filing that I still kept in the glove box, right there, 18 inches from where I was sitting, as a kind of talisman. Which I know sounds irrational, but it was my first piece of paper that said the house was mine, and I had kept it for 22 years, and I reached over and took it out of the glove box and held it. The clock said 5:09. I had been sitting longer than I realized. The parking lot was almost empty. The heat was still running. Some kindnesses are loans the lender forgets they're keeping. But what Derek had done was not kindness, and it was not a loan. It was a decision made in private, with my name used without permission, and underneath it was an assumption that I would not find out, or that if I did, I would not do anything about it. That I would weigh the family cost and decide it was too high. That I was still, at 47 years old, the one in the family who absorbed things quietly. He had miscalculated on that last point by a significant margin. I called Carly Osei back at 5:14 p.m. I told her I would like to meet as soon as possible. She had an opening Thursday evening at 6. I said I would be there. I started the car and drove home on Aldermoor Lane and walked into the house through the front door and stood in the kitchen for a moment with my coat still on, looking at the copper kettle on the stove and the Earl Grey tin on the counter and the stuck drawer that has not closed flush since 1998. Then I took my coat off. I made dinner. I did not call Derek. Diane stopped by my office the next morning before first bell. She set a coffee on my desk without asking and pulled the chair across from me and sat down. "You look like you slept 3 hours," she said. 2.5, I said. She waited. Diane is good at waiting. It is one of the reasons I have kept her in my life for 11 years when I am not, by nature, someone who keeps many people close. I told her. Not everything, not the full legal picture, but enough. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm meeting with the attorney Thursday evening," I said. "And then I'm going to do whatever she tells me I can legally do." "Do you need anything before Thursday?" "No," I said. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who wouldn't tell me I was overreacting. She nodded. She left the coffee. She went back to her classroom. She did not offer to solve it or tell me what she would have done or speculate about whether Derek had really understood what he was doing. She just left the coffee, which was exactly right. I spent Wednesday the way I spend days when I need to think without thinking about the thing I am thinking about. I worked. I processed the enrollment report I had abandoned on Tuesday. I handled a scheduling conflict for the spring IEP calendar and a budget discrepancy on the field trip account and a parent phone call about a bus situation that had been escalating for 2 weeks. I ate lunch at my desk and I did not text Derek or look at the email from Carly more than twice. Nate comes for dinner on Thursdays. He is 19, second year at the community college 30 minutes north, still comes home once a week, which I do not take for granted. He had been at the kitchen table 2 weeks earlier, before the call, before any of this, eating roasted chicken from the cast iron skillet my grandmother left me, talking about his philosophy class and whether the creek floods in spring, and whether his roommate's band was actually good or just loud. I had not known then that the kitchen where we were sitting had been removed from my name 9 months prior. I had thought about telling Nate before Thursday. I decided not to. He did not need to sit with it for 2 days without resolution. That was my weight to carry to the lawyer's office, not his. Carly Osei's office was in a low brick building 3 blocks from the county courthouse, up a narrow staircase with a wooden railing that wobbled slightly on the second step. The office itself was neat and unhurried. Mahogany desk, warm lamp, A wall of bookshelves with no decorative objects, just books, and a single framed certificate from Ohio State on the wall above the credenza. She had close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses on a chain, and she had printed the deed records before I arrived and arranged them in a green folder on the desk. "The transfer was filed 9 months ago," she said, sliding the folder toward me. "Quitclaim deed. Your signature appears on the document." I looked at the signature. I looked at it for several seconds. "That is not my signature," I said. "I suspected as much," she said. "That's why I called you rather than simply noting the record." She walked me through the situation clearly and without drama. Derek had filed a fraudulent quitclaim deed using a forged signature, transferring the property into an LLC registered in his name, almost certainly as collateral for a loan or a financing arrangement that required real assets. She had seen variations of this before, not commonly but not rarely either. What it required to undo was an affidavit of fraud filed with the county recorder's office, a quiet title action, and a formal complaint to the state real estate fraud division. She would handle the paperwork and the filings. Given the clarity of the paper trail, 22 years of mortgage statements, property tax records, utility bills, all in my name and only my name, she estimated the title would be restored within 4 to 6 weeks. "He'll receive notice once we file," she said. "It becomes public record." "I understand," I said. "Do you want to contact him before we proceed?" I thought about this genuinely. I sat with it for a moment. I thought about what Derek would say if I called him. I knew what he would say. He would say relax, and he would say it's just paperwork, and he would say the house was always going to be yours, and he would explain the LLC structure in a way designed to make me feel like I was misunderstanding something simple. I had heard versions of that register my entire life. I knew its shape. "No," I said. She nodded once. She uncapped a pen, a Pilot G2 from the cup on her desk, and set it in front of me. I signed the affidavit of fraud at 7:04 p.m. on a Thursday evening in February. I drove home on Aldermoor Lane and parked in the driveway and sat in the car for 2 minutes looking at the house. The porch light was on. I always leave the porch light on. I have left it on since Nate was small, back when I wanted him to see from down the street that someone was home, that the house was lit, that it was waiting. I went inside. I made a cup of Earl Grey. I went to bed. The following Monday, I was at my desk by 7:30. At noon, Carly sent me a single text, filed this morning. 8:31 a.m. I read it under the conference table during a staff meeting about the new attendance software. I put my phone face down on my knee and looked up at the assistant principal and thought, it is done. The paperwork exists. It has been stamped and filed and entered into the record. Derek does not know yet, and the world has already changed. Family without respect becomes entitlement, and entitlement grows teeth the moment you build something it cannot control. I had built something he could not control. He had tried to fold it into a structure he owned. And now a clerk in the county recorder's office had placed a document in a file on a Monday morning, and whatever Derek was doing that Monday, wherever he was, whatever deal he was working, whatever arrangement he had built on the assumption of my house as his collateral, had quietly begun to come apart. He found out 11 days later, on a Friday. His accountant called him first. I was in the school parking lot at 3:52 p.m. when my phone rang. I looked at the number. I let it ring. He called back at 3:54. I let it ring. The text began at 4:01 p.m. "Rose, call me." At 4:07, "I need to talk to you about the house situation." At 4:13, "I can explain the LLC. It's not what it looks like." At 4:19, "This is a misunderstanding. I was going to tell you." At 4:26, the deal was going to close in 60 days. I would have transferred it back. At 4:31, "You didn't have to get a lawyer involved. This is family." At 4:38, "Rose, please call me." I read them in the parking lot with the engine off and the February cold coming in. 14 texts in total by the time I got home. I counted them. I set my phone on the counter next to the copper kettle, and I started dinner. I did not respond to any of them. Derek showed up at my door at 7:22 p.m. I had thought about this. In the 11 days between filing and discovery, I had thought about this moment. what he would look like, what he would say, what I wanted to feel, and what I actually would feel, which are sometimes different things. I had thought about where I wanted to be standing and what I wanted to have in my hands and what tone I wanted to use. I had decided I wanted to be standing at the front door with nothing in my hands and a normal tone of voice because I had nothing to perform and nothing to prove, and the paperwork had already done everything that needed doing. I opened the door. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had been making phone calls all afternoon that had not resolved the way he needed them to resolve. There were lines around his eyes. I did not remember being there at Christmas. "Rose," he said. "Can I come in?" "No," I said. "You can stand here." He stood on the porch. The porch light was on above him. "I need you to understand," he said, "that I was going to tell you. The LLC was just a temporary structure. The house was always going to be yours. I was going to transfer it back the moment the deal closed." "Derek," I said, "that is my house. My name is on the mortgage payments for 22 years. My name is on the furnace invoice and the property tax records and every single utility bill from 1999 to 4 years ago when I paid it off. I did all of that alone. And you took my name off the deed without my knowledge and without my signature. I signed for you," he said. "I was going to tell you." "You said that already," I said. He looked at the porch boards for a moment. Then he said, "The LLC needed a real asset. I had a deal that was going to close in 60 days. 60 days, Rose. I would have put your name back on it, and you never would have known." There it was. Not malice, exactly. Not a man who had looked at his sister and decided deliberately to harm her. Something more complicated, and in some ways harder to sit with. The assumption that my house was a resource he could access without asking because he needed it and he was family, and surely I would have said yes if he'd asked, and since he was certain I would have said yes, asking had started to seem like a formality he could skip. He had grown up being told that help was available. He had never fully learned the difference between a resource and a person. He had also, I noticed, used the past tense. The deal was going to close. Not is going to close. "The deal fell through," I said. He did not answer, which was an answer. I looked at him standing on the porch under the light. He was 42 years old, and he was tired, and his deal had collapsed, and the collateral he had borrowed without permission had been legally reclaimed before he could return it, and I felt something for him that I am still not entirely sure how to name. It was not anger. I had moved through the anger in the parking lot 2 weeks earlier. It was something closer to a kind of sorrow for the version of him that had never been asked to build anything without a net and had therefore never learned how. "I'm sorry the deal fell through," I said. And I meant it. I was sorry about his situation. I was not sorry about my house. Those are two separate things, and knowing the difference between them took me years. "So that's it," he said. "You just went to a lawyer and didn't even call me." "Yes," I said. "You didn't give me a chance to explain." "Derek," I said, "you forged my signature." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't understand you." "I know," I said. And I did know. I had always been the one he did not understand, the one who did not need the help and therefore did not register as someone who might have needs of her own, the one who would absorb things quietly because she always had. He had built a picture of me over 42 years, and it did not include a woman who would drive to a lawyer's office on a Thursday evening and sign a document without telling him first. "Good night, Derek," I said. He left at 7:41 p.m. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment with my hand still on the knob, listening to his car start in the street. Then I went back to the kitchen and turned the stove down and finished dinner. The title was restored to my name 41 days after Carly filed the paperwork. She called me on a Thursday morning, the same day Nate comes for dinner, which felt right somehow, and told me it was done. I thanked her. She said it had been a straightforward case given the paper trail. I said I knew, but I was thanking her anyway, and she laughed a small, genuine laugh, and we ended the call. That evening Nate sat at the kitchen table with the cast-iron skillet on the stove and roasted chicken in the oven, and he looked at me for a moment before we sat down and said, "You seem like yourself. You've seemed off for a few weeks." "I've had something I was dealing with," I said. "Is it handled?" "Yes," I said. We sat down. I told him over dinner. Not the full legal picture, Not the 2.5 hours of sleep or the 38 minutes in the parking lot, but the shape of it. His uncle had filed paperwork that transferred the house into his name without my knowledge or my real signature, and I had filed the paperwork to undo it, and it was done. Nay was quiet for a moment. He set his fork down. Then he said, "Did you yell at him?" "No," I said. "Did you want to?" I thought about it honestly.
"Not really," I said.
I wanted my house back. I got my house back. He picked his fork back up. He looked at the kitchen, at the counter with the Earl Grey tin and the copper kettle and the drawer that has never closed flush, and he said, "This is your house." "Yes," I said. "It is." I still live on Aldermoor Lane. The creek flooded in April for the first time in 16 years, just a few inches over the bank, nothing that reached the yard, and I stood on the back porch in my navy wool coat with the missing third button and watched it recede in the early morning. The porch light was still on behind me because I had not turned it off yet. I stood there with a cup of coffee that had gone slightly cold, and I thought about the Hydrolite in 2007 and Nate handing me the applicator tip, and about the receipt for the title filing that is still in the glove box of the Honda Civic and probably always will be. Derek and I have spoken twice since February. Brief, careful conversations. Neither of us said anything that could not be unsaid. I do not know the current state of his business. I hope things improve for him. I am not going to allow my name, my house, or my 22 years of decisions to be the instrument of that improvement. Both of those things are true at the same time, and I have made a certain peace with holding them both. I see a therapist now, Dr. Morin, once every 2 weeks in a small office off Fifth Street with a ficus in the corner that has survived 4 years and looks like it has heard things. We have talked about Derek less than I expected. What we talk about more is the pattern underneath him, the one that made me hand my estate documents to a man who had been asking questions for 8 months without seeing what Diane saw in 30 seconds. The one that told me attentiveness was the same as care. That one is older than Derek. It goes back to the 2 registers our mother had for her children. I am not done working on it. But I am working on it, which is more than I could have said 2 years ago. Some people only know how to love what they can control. I spent a long time in my life arranging myself to be controllable enough to be loved by people like that. I am not doing that anymore. Forgiveness is not access. Understanding is not reunion. Compassion is not a key to my front door or my property records. A family will tell you blood is thicker than water until the day blood asks them to give something up. Saying no did not make me cruel. It made me responsible for the one life I actually have authority over, which is my own. The cost of keeping the peace in a house where peace means being the smallest person in the room is your whole life. I paid that cost for a long time. I paid it in documents handed over without questions asked, and in visits interpreted as care, and in a pattern I did not name until someone else named it for me. I am not paying it anymore. The house on Aldermoor Lane is mine. It has been mine since 1999. It will be mine for as long as I choose to live in it, and when I stop living in it, I will be the one who decides what happens to it, and my name will be on that paperwork too. If someone in your life has treated what you built, your years, your name, your quiet effort, as a resource available to them without asking, I want you to sit with one question before you decide how to respond. How long have you been teaching them that it was?